Continue now at the top of Daf Lamed Tesam and Aleph and Meseches Beitzah. This is Beitzah Daf 39a. On the previous Amud, the Gemara had said that if a woman borrows some ingredients on Yontif for her dough, so those ingredients keep the tchum of the lender, of the original woman that it's being borrowed from. And so the question of the Gemara had been, why isn't it batel in the dough? We should say the ingredients are batel in the dough, and therefore it should take on the tchum of the dough, meaning the tchum of the woman who's borrowing. And so now the Gemara gives a third answer to this question. Rav Ashi Omar, Rav Ashi says, Mishum dahavale davar sheyesh lo matirin, because over here we're talking really about a davar sheyesh lo matirin, meaning after Yontif there's going to be no isra of tchum. It's something that's going to be mutter eventually. That's called a davar sheyesh lo matirin. The chol davar sheyesh lo matirin afilu be'elef lo batel. The halacha is when you have a davar sheyesh lo matirin, it's not batel even in 1,000. So therefore, that's why again these ingredients that she's borrowing, they're not batel in the dough, and they keep the tchum of the original owner of the lender. And Rashi over here says, sheyesh lo matirin l'machar yolichua, meaning you can wait till tomorrow, then you can bring it wherever you want. Oh hayom yochlu akan, or even today you can eat the food, you can eat it right over here as long as you don't take it out of the tchum. So again, it's davar sheyesh lo matirin, it's not going to be batel. And the Gemara continues at the two dots. Rabbi Yehuda poter b'mayim. Rabbi Yehuda said in the Mishnah that when it comes to water, the water is batel in the dough, and therefore again it's poter, meaning it takes on the tchum of the borrower. It does not keep the tchum of the lender. And so the Gemara says, mayim in melach lo. Rabbi Yehuda seems to be saying this by water, but not by salt, meaning salt is not batel, only water is batel. So the Gemara says we have a contradiction, Vatanya, but we learned in a Brisa. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Rabbi Yehuda says, mayim umelach betelin, that water and salt are batel, bein be'isa, bein be'kedera, whether you're talking about in dough, or whether you're talking about in something that's cooking in a pot. So you see over here that it is batel. And so the Gemara answers, lo kasha, it's not difficult, ha b'melach sdomis. In one case we're talking about the salt of Sodom, ha b'melach is teroknis. The other one we're talking about the salt, which is called salt is teroknis. Rashi over here says, Sodom is daka hi ma'od uvetela. The way Rashi understands, melech sdomis is very thin, and it's going to be batel. And the melech histeroknis is not as thin, and therefore it's not going to be batel. Rashi says, V'teda, you should know, shasdom is dakahi, you should know that the stomus is thin. Da'amrina mibnei ma omru ma'im achron chova, mibnei shemelech sodomis yesh shemesame esoinayim. Talks about the fact that the reason why we have to wash ma'im achronim is because melech sodomis, it can blind a person. Alma dakahi ma'od, you see that it's thin, v'nidbekes biyad ve'inani keres. The idea is, it's going to get stuck to your hand, you're not going to realize it's there, and that's why it can cause this kind of damage. And so the Gemara continues, but one second. But we learned in a Brisa, Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Rabbi Yehuda says, Mayim umelach betelin be'isa, water and salt, they're batel in dough, ve'ein betelin be'kedera, but they're not batel inside a pot, mipnei rotva, because of the fact that you have liquid over there. Rashi over here has a slightly different girsa, ve'ein betelin hamayim be'kedera, mipnei rotva. In other words, talking specifically about the water, it says that the water is not batel in a pot. Hanikar le'nayim, meaning again, you could see with your eyes that the water is floating there. Umas nisan poter b'mayim. We just said that our Mishnah says that the water is batel. Tanan loshna isa v'loshna kedera. It doesn't matter if it's batel in dough or in a pot. It's going to be batel in both cases. The mas nisan b'tarti ayri. Our Mishnah is talking about both of them. Midaktani tavlin dahainu l'kedera, because the Mishnah mentions tavlin. That's talking about a kedera. That's talking about a pot. So now we have a contradiction in terms of water. In the case of the Brisa over here, it says water is not batel in a kedera. In our Mishnah, it says that it is batel in the kedera. And so the Gemara answers, lo kasha, it's not difficult. Haba ava, haba racha. It depends if it's a thick tavshil or a thin tavshil. Rashi over here says, ava tavshil ava, if you have a thick cooked item, she'ein rot vonikar, you can't even see the liquid anymore. V'haviki isa, that's the same thing as dough. And in that case, the water is going to be batel. And the Gemara continues with the Mishnah, hagacheles kiragle habaylim. If you have a coal, that follows the tchum of the original owners. Again, if it's borrowed on Yontiv, it's going to follow the tchum of the lender. V'shalheves b'chol makom. But let's say you have a flame, that you could take anywhere you want because it has no substance. Rashi over here says, V'shalheves kagon hidlik ner b'shalheves chaver. A simple case. Let's say you take a flame from the candle of your friend. So eino ma'akev b'ser tchum, and that flame does not have any tchum. It's not going to be limited to the tchum of the person you took the flame from. And the Mishnah continues, gachelas shel hekdesh. Now we're going to do some other differences between a coal and a flame. So if you have a coal that belongs to hekdesh mo'alin ba, then there can be me'ila. In other words, if you get personal benefit, that's going to be a problem of me'ila. You're going to have to bring a carbon asham. V'shalheves, but when it comes to the flame of hekdesh, lo nenin, so on a derabanan level, you shouldn't derive benefit from the flame of hekdesh. However, v'lo mo'alin, there's no me'ila either, because again, it has no substance, therefore there's no me'ila. And finally, the Mishnah along the same lines, hamotzi gacheles l'rishos harabim chayiv. If someone carries a coal to rishos harabim, that would be chayiv from transferring from rishos hayochid to rishos harabim. V'shalheves poter. But if you do the same thing with a flame, again, you're going to be patur because it has no substance. And the Gemara says, Tanu Rabbanan, the rabbis taught, Chamisha Devarim Namru Begachelis, there are 5 halachas that are stated with regards to coals. Hagachelis Karagle Habaylim V'Shalheves B'chol Makom, the Gachelis, it takes the tchum of the owner, but the Shalheves you can take anywhere. Gachelis Shal Hektish Moalin Bo V'Shalheves Lo Nenin V'Lo Moalin. When it comes to a coal of Hektish, there's Me'ila by that. When it comes to a flame, there is no Me'ila, although you're not allowed to derive benefit on a Derabanan level, like we said, but there's no Me'ila. Gachelis Shal Avodah Zara Asur, if you have a coal of Avodah Zara, it's going to be Asur. V'Shalheves Muteris, but a flame of Avodah Zara, that's going to be Mutter. Hamotzi gacheles l'Rosh Hashanah chayiv. If somebody carries a coal to Rosh Hashanah, he's going to be chayiv. V'shalheves potter. If he carries a flame, he's going to be potter. Hamudor hana mechaveru. If somebody takes a neder not to get any benefit from his friend, asur b'gachalto, would be prohibited to use that person's gacheles, to use that person's coal. Umutter v'shalhavto, but it would be mutter to take a flame from that person. All of these halachas are the same idea. The idea being that a gacheles has substance, and therefore these halachas apply. And a flame, a shalheves, has no substance, and therefore these halachas do not apply. The Gemara asks, Ma'ishna shalheves avodah zara deshari, but what's the difference? By a flame of avodah zara, it's completely permitted. There's not even an isur midrabanan. U'ma'ishna dehektish da'asira. And what's the difference by hektish, where there's an isur midrabanan? We said that there's no me'ila, but still there is a prohibition on a derabanan level to derive benefit, to get hana. And so the Gemara answers, Avodah Zara de mi'isa uvedili inshimina. When it comes to Avodah Zara, that's something that's considered disgusting. People naturally separate from it, so lo gazru bar rabbanan. So the rabbanan did not make a gezerah, they did not make a decree. Hektish de lomois, when it comes to hektish, which is not disgusting, the lo bedili inshimine, it's not something that people separate from, gazru bei rabbanan. So over there, the rabbanan made a decree against it again, and at the rabbanan level, it's going to be also to derive benefit from this hektish, which is from this shalhevis, which is hektish. And the Gemara continues at the 2 dots, quoting the Mishnah, Hamotzi gacheles l'Rosh Hashanah chayiv. Again, the Mishnah said, if you carry a coal to Rosh Hashanah, then you're chayiv. The shalhevis potter, but if you take a flame, then you're going to be potter. So the Gemara says, V'atanya, but we learned in a Beitzah, Hamotzi shalhevis kol shu chayiv. That on the contrary, if you carry a flame, even a small amount, any amount, you're going to be chayiv. So when it comes to a shalhevis, what's the halach? Is it that you're potter like the Mishnah says, or chayiv like the Beitzah? And so the Gemara says, Amar Rav Sheshes says, Kagon Shautzio Bekesim. The case in the Beitzah is you're taking out that flame, but it's talking about a wood chip that is burning. So you're carrying the flame on a wood chip, that already is going to be chayiv. So the Gemara says, V'tepuk le mishum kesim. But 1 second, if you're carrying the wood chip and the flame, you should just be chayiv for carrying the wood chip. Forget about the flame. What do we even need the flame in that case for? And so the Gemara says, B'deles le shiura. No, the case is that the wood chip is not the proper shear. There's a minimum shear that you have to carry in order to be chayiv, and the kesim does not reach that minimum shear. The Tanan, as we learned in the Mishnah, Hamotzi eitzim kedei levashel Beitzah kala. The halacha is that in order to be chayiv for transferring wood from one domain to another, it has to be enough wood that it can cook a light egg. And so therefore, again, we're talking here about a wood chip that's very small. It's not the proper shear, so you're only chayiv because of the flame. So the Gemara continues, Abaya says a different example could go into Shaife Mona Mishcha. The case is as follows. The case of the Beitzah where you're chayiv for carrying a flame, that's when you take a vessel and you smear it with oil, V'isli Beinur, and you light it on fire. So you're carrying this vessel that's kind of lit on fire, that's going to be the case. So the Gemara asks the same question, V'tepuk le mishum mana. So why don't we just say you're chayiv because you're carrying the vessel, forget about the flame. So the Gemara says, B'chaspa, no, we're talking about a shard, it's not a full vessel. It's just an earthenware shard. Gemara asks the same question. V'tepuk le mishum chaspa. You should be chayiv for carrying the chaspa, for carrying the shard. So the Gemara again says, B'deles le shiur. The case is the shard is not large enough to be chayiv for. The Tanan, as we learned in the Mishnah, cheres kedei litein bein patzim lechavero. The amount of cheres that you have to carry in order to be chayiv is the amount that you would put by the frame of a window. They used to use shards in the construction. Rashi will explain. Divrei Rabbi Yehuda. That's the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda. So in any case, those are the 2 answers. We have the answer that we're talking about a flame that's on a wood chip, and then that was the answer of Rav Sheshes, and you have the answer of Abaya that we're talking about a flame that's lit, that's on a vessel or on a shard. So the Gemara now says, Elohad d'tanan hamotzi shalav potter, but now that Mishnah which says that if you carry, our Mishnah which says that if you carry a flame, you're potter, so hechem ashkachasla, what's the case? What is this flame lit on? If it's not on a piece of wood, it's not on a vessel or on a shard, so where is this flame? How are you holding it? That you're going to carry it from one domain to the other. And so the Gemara answers, Kigon da'adye aduye l'Rosh Hashanah. The case over here is you're basically fanning the flame into Rosh Hashanah. There's nothing substantial. It's just the flame. And again, that's the case where you're going to be potter. We'll take a look at Rashi over here. Kolshu below shear. Again, the Beitzah said any amount of flame that you carry out into a different domain is going to be chayiv. Hadetani chayev keshotziu bekesam. So first the Gemara answered Rav Shesh's answer that it's using a wood chip. The kaven de yeshlo davar lehidavik, both since the flame is attached to something, chashuvi b'chol shu. It's considered to be chashuv even the smallest amount. Our Mishnah which says potter, it's like we're going to say later on, again, you kind of fan the flame into Rishas Harabim. Shaisa Dolekes Rishas Hayachid, Samach Rishas Harabim. It was lit in Rishas Hayachid near Rishas Harabim. V'nafach biyado, and you kind of blow it with your hand. V'nitak shal heves v'frichol Rishas Harabim, and the flame goes and it jumps, it flies over into Rishas Harabim. So then the Gemara asks that you should be chayiv just for transferring the wood chip. Amaitani hamotzi shal heves kol shu chayiv lav shal heves nami chayiv misham kesam. Even without the shal heves, you should be chayiv because of the wood chip. And so the Gemara says, "B'delos b'shir lo tzas Shabbos." The wood chip is not large enough for the shear being chayiv for carrying on Shabbos. Beitzah kala, because the shear that wood has to be is enough that it can roast a light egg. Sheikala levashel, meaning the kind of egg that is easiest to roast. Mikol habeitzim, from all eggs. V'shiru chachamim zu beitzas tarnagolas. The chachamim say that's the egg of a chicken. The egg of the chicken is the easiest one to cook, and that's the amount of wood that you need to carry to be chayiv. Abaye Omar hadetani chayiv kegon the shayfe lemona mishcha. Abaye says that you're chayiv. Let's say again you smear oil onto a vessel. Umishum deyesh lo davar leheaches bo hi chashuva. That's because the vessel is something you can really hold. That's chashuv. Avol bekesim lo svir leila Abaye, but by a wood chip, Abaye actually would hold that's not chashuv enough. Mishum demud hu umar lichbos. That's very small. It's going to be completely consumed very quickly. Inami ribusash minan Abaye. Another approach in understanding Abaye is telling us a chiddush. V'afilu b'chaspa v'almanami. Even if it's just a shard. In other words, according to this other version of Rashi, a wood chip, yeah, you're chayiv. But what about a shard? Abaye is saying to Rav Sheshes, even a shard is enough to make you chayiv on transferring the flame. Cheres linyan hotzah Shabbos. Again, when it comes to this earthenware, how much is the amount you have to transfer? Kadei litein ben patzim lechaver. You have to transfer enough that you put it between the frames of the windows. That's enough to be chayiv for transferring domains on Shabbos. Patzim kamo petzime pesachim u petzime chalomos. These are the frames of doors or the frames of windows. Hakvuim bechoma. They're in the wall. Vehein shel eitz. They're made out of wood. Vesodin osam lamato lamalu mishtei ruchos. And you would arrange the frame in a box, in a square, bottom and top, and on the two sides. Upoamim shein kitzarn barocha. Sometimes they were a little too small, a little too short in their width. Umoshiv shnayim zeh betzad zeh, and you put two next to each other. V'tzarch lo shivim b'shavi. You need to make them even. Shelo yehei zeh namach mizeh. One shouldn't be lower than the other. V'lo yehu amukim. They shouldn't be too deep. Ukesha'echad nota nosin l'tacht cheres oeven. So that's what they used to use this earthenware for. They would take some earthenware or stone lahashvosa. They would use that to even it up. O b'she'ein dai baruch of shnei mavdilan zeh mizeh ma'at v'nosin charasim dakim b'neim. Or they might take one piece of wood, put it a little distant from the other, and put a piece of earthenware between. So again, that was the function that they had in terms of construction. And so again, the Gemara said, when it says in the Mishnah, your potter, what is the case? Umeshani, like we said before, like we said before, the answer of the Gemara was, you're going to kind of fan the flame into the Rishos Harabim. That's when you are going to be potter. The Gemara continues with the Mishnah, Bor shel yachid. Let's say you have a pit that is owned by one individual. So karagle hayachid. So the water in that pit follows the tchum of the person who owns the bor. Again, whatever that person's tchum is, that's going to be the tchum of that water. V'shel anshe osoir. Let's say you have a pit that belongs to the city. It's public. Karagle anshe osoir. Then it follows the tchum of the city, meaning 2,000 amos in every direction from the edge of the city. V'shel ole bavel karagle hamimali. And finally, they used to have pits for those who were traveling. That's the ole bavel. Let's say they're traveling up for the regalim from Bavel. So then those pits would go by the tchum of whoever actually filled up the water. It would follow that individual's tchum. Rashi over here says, "Karagli hayachid ein molichin hamayim el karagli bal habor." You can only take the water according to the tchum of the owner of the bor. Karagli oz sa'ir means alpayim l'chol ruach chutz leibure. Again, 2,000 amos in every direction from the edge of the city. That's if it's a public pit that belongs to the city. V'shal ole bavel ha'asuin la'ovrei derachim, the one that's made for travelers, be'emtza haderech, on the road, v'asam b'nei hagol l'ishtos ba'alosam. And again, the people from the exile would drink as they traveled. Kiragle hamimali, that would follow the person who's filling up. Memneishu hefker, the idea is the water is hefker. The hefker nikne behagba, and when the person picks it up, he's going to acquire it. V'imba echad v'shalo meimav, let's say somebody else would ask the water from him. So in other words, one person would fill up the water and give it to somebody else. Eino molichan ela karaglev, it would go by the person who filled it up. Now Rashi points out over here, this Mishnah disagrees with Rabbi Yochanan's opinion that Cheftzei Hefker, that even if something's Hefker, it automatically gets its own Shvisa, 2,000 amos in every direction, La'atzman b'mekomon, from wherever it is at the beginning of Yontiv. That's, again, this Mishnah does not follow Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri's Shita. Now you might say it should be Karagle Kol Adam, whoever it goes anywhere. It's not Kona Shvisa, and you can take it wherever you want. Why does our Mishnah say that it goes by the tchum of the person who fills up? Person fills up, let's say, on Yontiv or on Shabbos, so it shouldn't follow his tchum. It should be able to be taken anywhere. So the answer to that is Kasavar Yesh Breira Lahachmir. This Mishnah holds that we even hold of Breira to create a chumrah. So we say retroactively, whoever filled it up, that was the tchum all along. The Amrin on Huvra, we say that it was clarified. The Me'asmol Nami Huvra, the Lahai Gavra Chazu. Whoever picks it up, we say that already from yesterday, that's who this water was going to belong to. Over RishusEkaimi, it's in his Rishus. And again, therefore, it acquires that person's tchum. It doesn't have zero tchum. It has the tchum of the person who picks it up. Rashi just says that in Erevin also, the Gemara says that this Mishnah does not follow Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri, like Rashi just said. And the Gemara says, Rami le Rava le Rav Nachman. Rava had the following contradiction. He presented to Rav Nachman. Tanan, we learned in our Mishnah, Bor shel Yachid Karagle HaYachid. It says again, if you have a bor that's owned by an individual, it follows the tchum of that individual. Uraminu, we have the following contradiction: Naharos Hamoshchin Umaynos Hanovin. Let's say you have rivers that flow, or you have springs that flow. Harei and Karagle Kol Adam. It follows everybody. In other words, it has no tchum whatsoever. And so that seems to contradict our Mishnah. So the Gemara says, Amar Rabba says, Hachav Mayaskin. And here in the Mishnah, what's the case? B'mechunasin, we're talking about gathered water, meaning it's not flowing waters, and that's why it takes on the tchum of the person who owns it. V'itmar Nami was taught as well. Amar Rav Chia bar Avin, Amar Shmuel, b'mechunasin. Rav Chia bar Avin says in the name of Shmuel again, our Mishnah is talking about gathered water that is not flowing. Rashi over here says, Harehin Karagle Kol Adam. Again, these flowing waters, they do not have any tchum, ein lehem shum shvisa, they have no makam shvisa, lo b'mekoman, v'lo karagle habaylim, v'lo karagle hamemale, ela kol adam olichan baraglav. Anyone can take it anywhere. The chol midi denaya, the idea over here is that anything that flows, anything that moves, less le shvisa, it has no makam shvisa. The Gemara continues at the two dots, quoting the Mishnah, v'shel ole bavel karagle hamemale. Again, it says if you have the pits that are for the travelers, that follows the tchum of whoever filled it up. And the Gemara says, Itmar, we have the following machlokas amoroim. Let's say somebody fills it up and gives it right over to his friend. In other words, in this case, he doesn't fill it up for himself and then give it to his friend. He actually fills it up on behalf of his friend. So Rav Nachman Amar Karagle Mishan Ismalu Lo. Rav Nachman says it follows the tchum of the person who it was filled for. And Rav Sheisha Amar Rav Sheisha says Karagle Hamamale. It follows the tchum of the person who is actually drawing the water. The Gemara says, "B'maikam iflagi." What's the machlokas over here? Mar savar bira de hefkerehu. One opinion holds that the bor is considered hefker, and therefore the first person to pick it up, that's the one that the tchum is going to follow that person. Umar savar bira de shutzfihu. The other one says that when it came to these pits that were again along the road for travelers, it's considered a partnership. It's considered like everybody has ownership over, and therefore whoever it's filled on behalf of, it's going to follow his tchum. And Rashi over here explains, Milei v'nasan l'chaveru kagon shemilei l'tzorech chaveru. The case over here is that he fills it again for his friend. Di malo latzmo, if he filled it for himself and then gave it to his friend, hatznan behedya. That's already in our Mishnah, karagle hamamali. Of course that follows the tchum of the person who's doing the filling of the drawing of the water. Karagle mishan esmalu lo denasa zeh shalucho v'kanalo. The idea is, according to the opinion, it follows the tchum of the person it's filled for. That's because the person drawing the water is like a shaliach of that person who's receiving the water. Rav Sheisha savar bira de hefkerehu. Rav Sheisha holds the bor is considered hefker. V'hamagbiya mitzila chavero lo kana chaver. The halach is if you pick up a lost object on behalf of your friend, it doesn't automatically go to the friend. It's considered what's called tofis l'bal chov. You're taking for a bal chov in a place where it hurts other people, and the halach in that case is the person who actually picks it up, he's the one that's kona. So again, if you hold the water as hefker, even if you pick up something hefker on behalf of your friend, it doesn't go to the friend, it goes to the person who's picking it up. Rav Nachman holds bira de shutfeu. No, when it comes to this kind of a bor, it's considered owned under partnership. Lo ifkiru b'nei hagola l'nesanu l'chol Yisrael shu shotfin bo. It was given to all of Klal Yisrael. They're all shutfin in this bor. Uchshamar zel chaver l'malos lo mechelko v'holach b'shlichuso nasa shlucho. So therefore, in this case, the shlichus really does work It's not like you're picking up something that's totally hefker for your friend. You're actually picking up something that's a shutfis. And again, this particular friend is going to be the owner of this particular water. And so the Gemara continues, Eisvei Rava Rav Nachman. Rava asks Rav Nachman the following question. Again, Rav Nachman said that the pit is owned b'shutfis, and therefore the tchum follows the person who it's filled on behalf of. So he asks from a Mishnah Nedarim. The Mishnah says, Hareini olecha cherem. Let's say somebody says the following language. He says, I am to you a cherem. I'm considered to you like I'm consecrated. So hamudar aser, that other person, the person who's being spoken to, is aser to get any benefit from the person who made the neder. Rashi over here says, hamudar aser, mishahutal olav haneder, aser lehanos mizeh shenodar haneder. The person who's being spoken to is aser to get any benefit from the person who actually uttered, who actually spoke the neder. Dahachi kamar, because here's what the person is actually saying. Mamoni alecha hektish. My money is considered hektish. It's like consecrated to you. You're not allowed to derive any benefit. And we'll continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Lamed Tes Amud Beis.